So welcome back to day 3. Sorry for the small technical break. And I hope you are eager to join our panel discussion with 5 very interesting experts and our commentators. So before I will introduce our panelists, I want to say that we are going to address a number of interesting questions. So one question, for example, will be, is there a strong case for a sharp acceleration in skills development initiatives in a post-COVID-19 economy powered by far greater use of technology? Is there a business case for disruptions and transformations in skills development to match the trends in the economy or society? We also want to look at what are the key parameters on which skills development institutions and training institutions need to metamorphose into taking into account the growing importance of online platforms for short-term digital training, digital credentials, and the blurring of lines between skills and higher education with applied degree programs. So, and last but not least, what is the key outlook for skills development for the millennials and Generation Z to prepare them for an increasingly volatile labor market? So this is what's ahead of us. But before I kick off the panel, I would like to draw your attention to a poll question. You know that we have every day one poll question for you. So if you look at your screen, you should see a question saying, how prepared is your country or skills system for the future of skills in the context of technological disruption? We give you 4 options. Maybe you say we are very well prepared for the technological disruptions and its skill challenges. Maybe you say we are somehow prepared. There are some successful initiatives, but quite a handful of challenges remain. Maybe we are hardly prepared despite first initiatives, or you feel like we are not really prepared at all. So these are the 4 options we give you. So let's see, I see that answers are coming in. Yeah, so it's your very personal perception. Of course, it's not something too scientific because you all have a different context. It's an opinion poll of our audience. And I can see that only 4% on my screen say that we are well prepared for the technological disruptions, and half of our audience say we are somewhat prepared, but only 8% say we are not at all prepared. We need to act swiftly and decisively to catch up. So it's pretty much in the middle. So there is work to do, but it's either not too many people who think we are very far behind, or people think we are already there. So thank you very much for that. And now I would like to move on to our panel. And we are going to discuss the future of skills and jobs in the context of technological disruptions. And I'm going to be in dialogue with 5 experienced colleagues. Let me quickly introduce them to you. My first panelist is Trew. He is the Adolescent Education and Skills Advisor at UNICEF Regional Office of South Asia. He's currently based in Kathmandu, and John brings 25 years of experience, and his major focus of his work is on inclusive youth economic empowerment and skills development initiatives. And John actually served previously as a global head of skills and opportunities for youth employment and entrepreneurship and director of the Youth Employment Solutions team at Plan International. Welcome, John. My second dialogue partner today is Mr. Ben Ong. He's a program lead for the Global Smart Industry Readiness Initiative, in short SIRI, at the World Economic Forum. And we will talk soon about SIRI in a short while from now. Prior to joining the World Economic Forum, Ben was the senior manager and head of the strategy division of the Singapore Economic Development Board. And what I found striking, Ben is originally an evolutionary biologist by training. I can't even pronounce the word properly. I would love to talk a little bit about what perspectives you could bring to education, but I have some other questions for you. My third discussion partner is Mrs. Jieying. She is a lecturer at the School of Engineering at the Institute of Technical Education. And ITE is a public vocational education institution in Singapore, which offers close to 100 courses. So Ms. Jieying brings a lot of experience from the private sector, and as a mechanical engineer by training, she has a strong interest and passion for new trends and development around Industry 4.0. Happy to have you with us. My first discussion partner probably doesn't need much introduction to many of you. I have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Borhene Chakroun. He is the director of the Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO in Paris. He has published many articles and books on education, and much of his most recent work focuses on global trends in reforming education and training systems and global agenda for skills development in the context of the SDGs. Happy to have you on the panel, Dr. Borhene. And last but not least, I welcome from the ADB, Ms. Shanti Jagannathan. She's the principal education specialist at the ADB. She brings also over 25 years of experience with reforms and transformation in school education, in Tibet and higher education in Asia. And she has a lot of research studies on skills for greening economies, on Asia's knowledge-based economies and implications of Industry 4.0 on education and training. And many of you who are coming regular to our skills fora know that she's also one of the leading organizers of some of the previous skills fora. So very to have you with us, Shanti. And let me invite you to kick off our discussion with a lightning talk. I understand that you led some ADB research looking at implications of the fourth industrial revolution on jobs, on skills, tasks, and readiness of education and training. So the next 12 minutes are all yours. Shanti, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Jost.
So we are back live. So I now will hand over again to my colleague from the ADB, Shanti, who has a lightning talk for us. Shanti, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jost. Big hello to everyone who is joining the session today. It's a great pleasure to participate in this panel together with other leading global experts. Mr. Bakchi gave a really excellent keynote address. He really stressed the importance of multidimensionality in development and how different factors interact with one another for successful skills for jobs, and all the inputs needed to help people turn the skills advantage into effective and productive participation in the workforce. So I want to start, next slide. I want to start my presentation today with the opening premise that when we say the future of jobs and skills in the context of technological disruption, that future is already here. So a number of digital and disruptive technologies are already becoming mainstream, and newer and improved versions of those technologies are appearing in the market at even greater speed. So preparing for the future is not really an option. In fact, it's in many cases, it's actually a bit of a catch-up situation. And the speed of response from training and skills development institutions have become much more important. So we need to think about continuous agility and adaptability to market forces, as this will not be a one-time adjustment. So these types of trends are really spelling the broader need for much more continuous responsiveness from training institutions. Now, These are some of the technologies that embody the fourth industrial revolution. We've been hearing about them for quite a while, and they are bringing very profound and very transformative changes and are shaping labor markets and workforces in many different ways. Next slide. Given this influential role played by these technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, ADB had undertaken studies to assess the implications on skills and jobs. A study in 4 countries of ASEAN had been completed earlier this year, and another study in the Central West Asia region is ongoing. These studies have included an in-depth review of 2 industries per country to understand the dynamics of how employers and training institutions view jobs and skills. Surveys were undertaken in all the 4 countries, and I would like to give a snapshot of just 5 takeaways from these studies. The first takeaway is that fourth industrial revolution can bring productivity increase. The surveys in our study showed that employers expect productivity increase of over 25% from the deployment of 4IR technologies in the sectors that we studied. While some of the sectors like automotive, IT, BPO, electronics, and food and beverages intuitively are likely to report significant productivity gains from 4IR, we found that even traditionally labor-intensive sectors like garments and tourism will also gain, maybe not to the same extent, but they will also gain from productivity increases. The second takeaway is that in the longer term, 4IR could lead to net job gains. We've all heard alarm bells of how automation could lead to great job losses. And indeed, there will be job losses, as is shown by the red bars. However, productivity and income gains over the longer term period, all sectors could benefit from new jobs growth. And this is true for all the sectors, all the 8 sectors that we included in the study. So we project that over the longer period until 2030, there are likely to be net job gains from the deployment of fourth industrial revolution technologies. But of course, it is premised on investment in skills and the appropriate policy domain. Takeaway 3 is that employers believe non-routine and analytical tasks will become far more important. And this is not many other studies have also come to this conclusion. The red section is about routine and physical tasks, which are on a decline. And the green part is non-routine and analytical tasks and work, which are expected to gain in prominence. Even in terms of deployment of robotics, in recent times, the interaction between robots and human collaboration is becoming more important, calling out the importance of analytical capacities. Next slide. The study also looked into how the additional skills for the fourth industrial revolution could be developed. The fourth key takeaway is that the bulk of the additional demand for new or upgraded skills for 4IR may need to be met through on-the-job training. So this has implications of how training channels, how different training institutions are going to gear up to design, deliver, and collaborate with industry partners to ensure that the skills demand or the demand for skills to serve 4IR occupations will be met. The fifth key takeaway that I'd like to share, next slide, is that there is a big gap between training institutions and employers on the state of readiness of the workforce. This table shows that across the 4 countries covered in the study, training institutions are far more optimistic about how adequately prepared graduates are for entry-level positions and the quality of their general and job-specific skills. Whereas employers tend to be less optimistic or more concerned about adequate entry-level skills or adequate specific and general skills of the workforce entering the market. This just shows that there needs to be far more collaboration and connectedness between training institutions and the employers. And the training institutions need to have a constant a reality check on what the market is calling for in terms of the caliber of trained professionals. This is just a snapshot of the findings from the study. We have a suite of 4 country reports and a synthesis report that you may like to look into. The link is at the bottom of this slide. Now I would like to go to the opening premise that I made. Next slide. That 4IR trends are actually already upon us, and it is urgent to take the necessary steps to remain in tune with market forces. If we just look at the numbers, there are about 2.7 million industrial robots in operation in 2020, and 2/3 of the new installations are being taken up in Asia. Of course, China is the market leader, and it's followed by Japan, Korea, but India and Thailand, countries like that, are also gaining ground. The global blockchain market is expected to have an exponential growth from about 3 billion in 2020 to nearly 40 billion in 2025. And again, Asia is expected to gain a substantial share in the market, with applications ranging from finance, payments, energy, and so on. E-commerce, which had picked up even greater pace due to COVID, is expected to reach sales of 2 trillion in 2025, with Asia and Pacific expected to record the highest growth rate among the regions. If we look at EdTech, private equity investments in EdTech have been heating up since 2018 and doubled in private equity investments between 2019 and 2020. The global artificial intelligence market size of 62 billion in 2020 is projected to grow at an astounding compound average growth rate of 40% up to 2028, again with the APAC region registering good growth. So these accelerating trends are, next slide, are leading to far-reaching transformations in the functioning of the labor market. Hiring and working practices, how economies produce, consume, trade are all transforming significantly. Naturally, the mechanics of how education and training need to keep pace is also undergoing change. The rise of the gig economy, which is valued at 350 million in 2020, has taken shape. And that there are micro job sites which are offering global on-demand 24/7 workforce is also on the rise. For instance, the Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is the crowdsourcing platform for jobs, has 7 million users. So every aspect of the workforce and the labor market, retail, logistics, and app-based services are all recasting business models using digital principles, where there is hyper-customization to individual needs and hyper-localization, which is in evidence during COVID. The way education and training systems are also responding is also bringing new insights for us. India has put in place 500 million QR-coded textbooks that link to digital content. Between 2018 and 19, the artificial intelligence workforce in India was double with investments in skills development. When we look at smart logistics, cloud service, AI-based predictive maintenance of infrastructure, these which seemed very far away and very advanced, are now gaining prominence. AI is making the demand for talent and skills grow at a very rapid pace. So all this, means that traditional and conventional systems of training and education cannot really meet the needs in a timely way. We need a full ecosystem that spans, multiple opportunities and multiple pathways. So what are the implications for policy and practice? Next slide. The first is that there needs to be multiple channels for delivering skills that combine brick and mortar, virtual training, short duration boot camps, virtual academies, and so on. 4IR technologies need to be included in the infrastructure for training institutions to provide the opportunities for immersive training. Instructional design for online and blending learning needs to be revamped altogether, because we can't follow the same model as in a physical classroom, which match and we need to ensure that there is matching investments in training and support to teachers and trainers. Quality standards for training learning and competencies are critical so that we are not a victim to the digital dazzle, that we just don't look at technology for its own sake, that technology is actually helping to bring quality in the labor market, is actually building the competencies that we want in the workforce coming into the market. Algorithms can help trainers to monitor levels of student engagement in online classes, but also help them to grasp higher order competencies. So all this type of things are possible when we look at skills acquisition that can be facilitated by adaptive tutorials and intelligent training systems. All these are options that are becoming possible because of progress in technology. It is also very crucial for policymakers to consider appropriate governance and regulatory structures to ensure safety, ethical practices, and also address equity in all its aspects. I mean, this was really brought out so beautifully by the keynote address by Mr. Bakshi. We need to ensure that in access to digital devices, connectivity, courses, and every other service, we are conscious of equity principles, whether it's for disadvantaged people, for women, for people with disabilities, and so on. So I want to end this slide on an upbeat note that technology can be beneficial to all, including the poor and the disadvantaged. It just depends on how regulations, opportunities, and affordability play out. I have often been asked, during the course of the study and other interactions, it is very well to talk about fourth industrial revolution, but what about countries or parts of countries and regions where there is still the third industrial revolution or even the second industrial revolution, which is still prevailing? I'd like to say that this current generation of technological tools and mechanisms are part of a wave that actually can cause all boats to rise. We can see the coexistence of different levels and types of technologies, and the latest versions can propel change even for those who are in 2 generations behind. And we can see that progress if we adopt the right kind of policies and practices. And it's not necessarily a bad thing for different things to coexist at the same time. And I think this is really an important time for us all to consider making a blueprint and industry transformation maps for more advanced and specialized skills for the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shanti, for setting the scenes. The future is already here. The question is no longer if, but how to prepare for it. That's one of the key quotes I take away. And you also shared some very interesting key takeaways from the ADB study, as well as some key trends. So before I invite my panelists to the digital stage, I would announce a 2-minute break. So refresh yourself. In 2 minutes, we are back live, and then we're gonna have a deeper dialogue with my 5 panelists. Thank you very much. welcome back. So now it's time actually for our talk show style panel discussion, the future of skills and jobs in the context of technological disruption. And I already introduced our 5 speakers. But before we're going to start, I want to remind the audience, you can actually ask questions and write comments on our platform. And we want to highly encourage that. You can vote for the questions, so upvote the questions. So maybe the more popular will be then more likely addressed. And if you have a specific question to a speaker, please indicate that in your question so we can channel it to the right person. So without further ado, so welcome to all my 5 speakers again. And let me now start with Mr. Ben Ong from the World Economic Forum. And following the presentation by Shanti on ADB's complete and ongoing work of the implications of the 4th Industrial Revolution on skills and jobs, I want to open our talk show style discussion touching on an initiative actually that you are the project lead for, which is the Smart Industry Readiness Index, or SIRI for short. As I'm aware, this program, the World Economic Forum, together with your network of partners, is actively engaging in a global effort to help corporations evaluate and benchmark themselves. So, Ben, can you share a little bit more about this initiative and how this helps companies in developing Asia and the Pacific start, scale, and sustain their Industry 4.0 digital transformation journey, particularly in the context in the future of work? And maybe a bonus question, what are some of the unique elements to this program that can actually provide tangible help for companies with intention to transform? Ben.
Thank you so much for the question. I think we are all familiar that the Industry 4.0 and digitalization has really arrived, particularly in the industrial sector. However, I think as companies pick up the impetus and intention to kickstart their transformation, I think there's still one main gap that still lack in the open community, which is the availability of a neutral, open program that companies can use to, I think, number one, evaluate themselves so they know where they are, where they're good at and where they're bad at. And number two, be able to benchmark themselves against other companies. So this Smart Industry Readiness Index program, or SIRI for short, aims to close this gap by providing what we call an official SIRI assessment, which is a independent neutral assessment or audit, if you will, that a company can take up to, number one, understand the overall maturity of their operations. Number two, benchmark themselves against their industry peers and competitors. And number three, the program also offers recommendations of where they can focus on to find the highest impact areas. So I think what is so unique about this program is a couple of things. Number one, of course, it is holistic in and of itself, which comes to why it's important in the context of work, because beyond focusing on process and technology, I think both of which I think most of us are quite familiar, you also have an equally important component on organization, where we go down and evaluate the overall organizational structures and programs in place to see if the workforce have the opportunities to be constantly upskilled. Within the organization building block, we have actually segmented this to emphasize that it's important to not only focus on the leadership, which is the management level, but also focus on the general workforce. So the program covers both groups of employees within the organization, which we believe in tandem will help any company accelerate their transformation. Beyond that, there's also the programs will emphasize interlinks between the organization component as well as process and technology. So I think this whole notion is to say that as you think about process improvement, as you adopt new technology, you need to make sure that the workforce are onboarded and on some of the new things that a company wants to take up, so that there's no lack or gap in terms of surprises when something new comes into the organization. I think the last point, I think the bonus question that you mentioned, the unique elements, just quickly over here for the audience, there's two main components. So the very first unique component is within the program, there's a very special learning and education element that we've infused in the SIRI program. So what we have done is we are very deliberate in distilling a lot of complex concepts, whether it's on evaluation, transformation, any area you want to think of, or benchmarking. We distill them into very digestible frameworks or concepts that the general community can come down and actually learn. So before they embark on any assessment program or do something more, they can actually peruse through all the suite of frameworks and tools that we have published to get a digestible set of content for the use. The second one, of course, would be the assessment program, which I kind of mentioned earlier. So under the official SIRI assessment program, when a company undertakes this independent audit, they will be provided with a report that actually details some of the key elements that they can work on, which includes recommendations on high impact areas as well.
Thank you, Ben. Let me ask you one more question. There has been much discussion how digitalization is disrupting not just the way education institutions train our workforce, but also how organizations develop their employee training program. In what ways can education institutions and corporations leverage SIRI to reskill and upskill their students and employees? Is there a real need for business to form a closer partnership with skills institutions in this space?
Yeah, I think definitely so. If you look at the general HR organization within a lot of companies, the HR organization is usually quite separated from, let's say, the operations team or the enterprise management team. I think moving forward, when the narrative of Industry 4.0 is emphasizing around the concept of integration, so where everything needs to move in tandem and not separated. So I think you start to see a lot of different some newer programs coming out that emphasize on the convergence and synergies of these two spaces, where I think there's a new program that recently came out in Singapore called the IHCI program, called the Industry 4.0 Human Capital program, where they focus that on the emphasis that as you do any transformation, you need to bring the HR or the workforce component at the same time and the same pace together with it. And I think this is also give a bit of a guidance to a lot of the institutions of higher learning, where when they either teach transformation to the students, or when they want to teach HR practices to HR practitioners, whether it's when they come for CET courses, to infuse elements on both on the other side of the program. So I think in the coming months or years, you'll start to see a bit of augmentation of some of these programs that the IHLs will be infusing in their courses, which I believe is a step in the right direction. And they can only do so in partnership with businesses and other organizations like ADB, who can provide more guidance in terms of what the industry needs as they think about more integrated transformation.
Thank you very much, Ben. So let's talk actually with someone from an actual education institution. We have with us Jieying from the School of Engineering, Institute of Technical Education. Jieying, the Smart Manufacturing Living Lab is a new addition to the ITE College Central's training facility. And I understand it contains many Industrial 4.0 key technologies and concepts. So can you share how this facility had helped your students in learning I 4.0 and how school staff and industry partners had benefited? I think I see already the one picture you brought us. So over to you, Jieying.
Okay, thank you. So allow me to share more about our Smart Manufacturing Living Lab. So it is a new addition in IT College Central. It is a training facility which provides students, industrial partners, and general public an authentic I 4.0 technology. So the lab will feature absence of cyber physical twin, remote monitoring and control of the shop floor production, Lot 1 production capability. So how this facility helps our students in I 4.0 are, it is an authentic shop floor where lecturers will play various roles to conduct workplace situational learning for our students. In this living lab, students are able to gain relevant skills and future ready them for their workforce and industry. So this is how our students can have their authentic learning in our authentic shop floor. This is to better equip them for future. So how our staff and industrial partners can benefit from it is our members, the 5 of us, we have acquired valuable learning experience for the past 5 years. So we can share the experience and knowledge with our school colleagues and students. So individual members, we have learned different technologies and developed stations assigned to us, equipping us as a station experts in our respective field. So this Living Lab not only benefit ITE students, ITE staff. This Living Lab also serve as a learning model for SME, small medium enterprise, as a catalyst to help them upgrade and transform their production towards Industrial 4.0. And we also receive commendation from our industrial trade association like SIAA, Singapore Industrial Automation Association, SIAA, and Singapore Precision Engineering and Technology Association, SPECTA. It also generates much interest outside our schools. So numerous visits and tours were conducted for our government agency, industrial partners, and overseas visiting from vocational school. So in year 2019, the TVET Leaders Training in Bangkok and Singapore also leveraged on Smart Manufacturing Living Lab to demonstrate the I4.0 offsite remote line control and monitoring. So this is how our new edition, Smart Manufacturing Living Lab, have benefited our IT students, IT staff, and our industrial partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jieying, for an introduction to the Smart Manufacturing Living Lab. And let me talk now a little bit with John Trew. John Trew is an education specialist at UNICEF, and I understand you have a direct connection with youth through the Generation Unlimited program, and I understand this is a powerful way of anticipating the needs of young people and their participation in labor markets. It is pretty clear that in the entire region that levels of youth unemployment actually far higher than the average unemployment. So young people, I guess, are looking at employment in far different ways compared to previous generation. How are you perceiving the need for revamping skills development systems that specifically suit the needs of young people, John? You have to unmute yourself.
Thanks so much. Little things like that happen. Yesterday, UNICEF held the Adolescent Skills and Employability Consultation for our 75th anniversary. And right now, the Asian Development Bank is hosting the Asia Pacific Youth Symposium, which gathers together young people from across the regions. And what we heard from that is really about understanding young people's empowerment and being engaged, and that there are still significant instances where participation, especially of people with disabilities and young women, are hindered. This results in a lack of confidence for these young people to engage in projects and programs that are aimed to give them safe space. Another big issue for South Asia is the issue of child and arranged marriages is still highly prevalent in the region. Many of the young people yesterday spoke about the concerns that this has, and it hits close to home. They have friends and relatives who are forced to participate in these marriages and have no choice. That issue of choice is so important. The systematic discrimination in accessing education skills and employment, issues of good governance that exist in the education system, and transparency that extends into the workforce. This leads opportunities that are barred to be accessed by those who really deserve it. So what do we do about that? And young people are telling us there's a need to be more relevant, agile, and responsive, not only to the needs of young people, but also to the needs of the market. We just don't need a solution for today. We need to look at a system level solution that enables change to be rapid and agile over time. We can find solutions for today, but we'll be having to find those same solutions 2, 3, 4 years from now. So it's really about a system level change that is necessary. And we need to be laser focused in terms of the skills building and training and cultivating an enabling environment that prioritizes innovation. For example, in the blue and green economies and labor intensive industries. But this is very difficult. One of the things that UNICEF has done is really important is skill sets for young people. And we need to create that space. We can't just teach them how to cook. We need to let them cook. We need to let them work on automobiles. We need to let them have the space to demonstrate those skills through formal and non-formal approaches. For us, one of the key things that we do is Upshift is a program that supports youth and adolescents to be a powerful force for social and economic change while contributing to the competitive labor market through a blended approach for youth and adolescent development, where social innovation and social entrepreneurship are key. Upshift has been implemented in 42 countries and now is scaling up across South Asia. So Upshift has been the building blocks for skills in adolescents and young people beyond the program duration and that are incorporated into their lives. So really, it's about listening to young people and looking at the system level change that we can bring about on their behalf and with them.
Thanks, John. I have a follow-up question for you before I bring Borhene into the conversation. So digital natives learn and train in different ways compared to older people in the workforce. However, training systems operate in somewhat traditional methods still, right? So young people are far more ready to experiment with mixed methods in acquiring skills and knowledge. So how is your institution looking at influencing the landscape for training for the digital natives?
That's a great question. I mean, we have to remind ourselves of the magnitude of this issue, that there are over 627 million children that are below the age of 18 just in South Asia, and that we have the highest number of out-of-school young people and children. That's specifically about 31.8 million. So the task is extremely daunting. On top of those is the school closures, the disruption that COVID has had, which has left many young people out of distance learning in the new normal and has excluded vulnerable and marginal groups due to the persistent digital divide and fewer opportunities to promote a skills building and employability. This has really been an issue in which UNICEF has prioritized with our Reimagine Education. UNICEF has launched various initiatives to address this persistent digital divide, such as the GIGA initiative with ITU to provide connectivity to every school, and the Learning Passport and Passport to Earning with Microsoft and Accenture and others to make digital learning more accessible to all children, including displaced refugee children and children with disabilities. But we have to be clear, as the keynote said, that gender digital divide is constant and persistent in the region. Provided that the digital gender gap is an interesting area for us to look at, but we need to work to address this. We need to involve young women, not just in designing with them, but designing with young women and girls and understanding the ecosystem and the gender dimensions that technology brings. We also need to help governments in the region define that vision of success for the digital landscape and what it is and how do we get there. We need to take COVID-19 as a clear example that young people have demonstrated and know best what's facing them. We have to be clear. None of us are experts in being a young person during a global pandemic. We don't understand what they've been going through. So here is an area where we have to critically listen to young people, understand their needs, and partner with them as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I see Borhene taking notes, and I'm sure he would like to comment on what has been said earlier. Just let me ask you also a question, but I give you the opportunity to respond what you have heard before. So in the context of the digital revolution, the concept of lifelong learning, what you are standing for, has gained increasing attention, what is not a new concept, right? So there is, of course, not surprising as experts anticipate that many mid-career professionals need to whether upskill or entirely reskill. And I learned that UNESCO is leading a global coalition for the recovery from COVID. There has been interesting work done to anticipate future needs, and you have led a series of tracks on digital skills and jobs with the Broadband Commission, with the ITU, and other important global players. So I understand that these are helping agencies to see the potential of advanced digital technologies like 5G, AI, and so on. So if these are really to make a difference to developing countries, what are the necessary investments needed not only to prepare young people, but also helping those in the workforce to remain in the job market? Borhene, a difficult question, but I give you also the chance to respond to what has been said earlier.
Thank you so much, Jost, and very warm greetings from UNESCO headquarters in Paris to the participants, to the fellow speakers. Let me also thank ADB colleagues, Shanti, Brajesh, and other colleagues for this opportunity to join forces together with UNICEF, with the Education Commission, with the Eden Prize to organize this skills forum, which is a very important milestone, I believe, for the discussion regarding the demand for skills and how we respond to the crisis and how we recover and build resilience and reimagine education going forward. At UNESCO, we are obviously very clearly engaged in responding to the crisis, but also to build thinking around the futures. One of the aspects that is important to highlight, and I would like to build on my colleagues and fellow speakers' interventions before coming to the details of your question, Jost. First of all, I think from the keynote speaker and from Shanti's intervention, there are some key features of the labor market that we have to keep in mind. One is that the informal economy is not shrinking. There is no evidence that the informal economy is shrinking, including in the digital economy. And we see it in the gig economy specifically. The second is that we are seeing a polarization of the labor market from a demand for very low-skilled persons and for high-end skills. That creates a gap between the ladders and will create difficulties also for the lifelong learning perspective. A third aspect that I feel important to consider is that it's not only sufficient to look at what the demand from the economy or from the enterprises. We have to listen also to the individuals, and that's what John was highlighting about the demand for skills from youth, how they can co-construct, how they can co-build. Maybe two additional features that are important from my perspective before I go to your specific question. One is that we have to take into consideration the lifelong learning perspective. We are speaking about youth, it's important, but we have to speak about workers who are already in the workplace and will require reskilling, upskilling, and what Shanti was suggesting earlier is very important. Also what the keynote speaker about this shift from informal economy to formal economy, from non-distant work to distant and fair and sustainable work. The second aspect that comes in the discussion, but still I think is the elephant in the room. We cannot speak only about the digitalization without speaking about the climate change. These are two twin climate change important aspects. Climate change in technology, but also climate change in the environment. And the investment in the technology, the Industry 4.0, the new industrial development has to be sustainable and has to take into consideration the threat of the climate, and in this case, the environmental challenges. And I feel that this is important when we are discussing those aspects. Last piece, before I come to specifically to the question, is that digital does connect, but it divides. And it's very important that we take into consideration the risks of the division and the divides related to digitalization. And I think this is an aspect that we have to keep in mind, and it's of course about equity and inclusion. It's about equity and inclusion within countries and across countries. And it's the importance of the skills and education in filling this digital divide and bridging the divides. So these are, I think, important aspects that we have to keep in mind when we are discussing and when we are providing policy support and policy advice. Jost, you mentioned two pieces of work that I would like to leverage to make a bit my intervention. First, we have launched the Global Education Coalition, and the 4 co-organizers of the Skills Forum are part of this Global Education Coalition that is actively engaged to respond to the crisis of the COVID and to recover and build resilience. And one of the initiatives that we have launched is the Global Skills Academy, which is trying to bring together different partners to respond to the demand for skills and for employability skills in particular. And this is a partnership with the companies like Dior, Huawei, IBM, Microsoft, and trying to leverage their capacities to respond to the demand for skills from youth and to work with the TVET institutions to respond to the crisis. And one of the aspects that we have learned is that while there is a lot of policy attention to the digital skills, to the employability skills, when we go to institutions and try to work with them, we find that there is very little attention given to the soft skills, very little attention given to digital skills. Many teachers are lacking the digital skills. So there is a need to keep attention and keep working with the institution to develop those skills and to offer the right skills in that context. The second aspect is that in most cases, the certification related to those employability skills are not very transparent. And the way the assessment is being conducted is not very clear and clearly articulated. And we feel that there is a need for better transparency and visibility of those skills. And the third aspect is that in most cases, the institutions are developing programs not taking into account the local context. It's important to take into account the global discussion on the digital skills or employability skills, but the local economy is very important in this case. And it's very important that the institution build bridges with the local economies. So we see these are problems in the analysis and the action that we are taking through the Global Skills Academy. And we feel that this is something that has to be taken into consideration as well. And Shanti mentioned the importance of looking at the advanced demand, but also take into account also the incremental and progressive demand. Let me respond to two aspects of your question in 1 minute. First of all, we think that there are some guiding principles that have to be taken into consideration when we are discussing those strategies. First, that it has to be learner and educator-centered approaches. We cannot be driven by just the technology. We have to take into consideration the demand, and this is very important. The second is that it has to be taken into account the equity and inclusion dimension, and probably we'll come back to that aspect. The third aspect that is important that when we speak about connectivity, when we speak about digital, it has to be a meaningful connectivity, and that means taking into account the demand and the needs. The fourth aspect and principle is that it has to be integrated within a national strategies and not piecemeal intervention. We see many initiatives that are standalone and not integrated within a national investment. And the fifth, and I finish with that, is that the investment has to cater for free, open sources and integrating resources that are coming from the local stakeholders and not just consuming the global supermarket of technologies. It's very important to take into account the local ecosystem, the local demand, local languages, local culture as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Borhene. These were very, very rich points. And I'm looking at the time, so in 7 minutes, I would like to go to the comments of my ADB colleagues so that I can actually then engage the audience. So quick question to Jieying. So let me give a little bit of twist about our TVET and skills related questions by incorporating a gender aspect, actually. We haven't talked too much about gender yet. You have a degree in mechanical engineering, I mentioned earlier, that up to now, I understand, is a very male-dominated profession. And I think engineering in general is still male-dominated. So what have you seen as enablers for education and training institutions to attract encourage and maintain more women in the engineering profession? And what to you are preparations needed for women actually to succeed in this field? Maybe a short answer to that.
Okay, yes, there aren't many women in engineering, but I believe that situation is getting better as compared to my parents' time, as we are given more opportunity as compared to previous. So now girls will get to choose their career, and also not many still choose engineering. It could be due to conforming to the social norms. So I believe we still need more women in engineering, because now the problems are getting more complex. It could be multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary. So as women, our brain structure is wired differently. So I believe we can come up with different solutions and to better solve the problem together with men. So I still believe that women is required and more women should join engineering. Back to your question, how should we attract more women into this exciting field? I believe we should not attract them. We should let them follow their passion. So we can help the women to discover their talent and passion in this area. So by exposing them with more things about engineering when they are young in a good way. So if they think they like engineering, they will go for it instead of attracting them. And how should we prepare or succeed to let women succeed in this field? I think, well, to be in engineering, in order to succeed, not only we have to work hard, we have to get ready to get our hands dirty. Be resilient, agility, adaptability is also important. Future ready, being future ready, be a lifelong learner, positive learner. Not forgetting to have strong management support, colleague support in engineering. And lastly, family support. As a young parents, young moms, I believe family support is very important for us to succeed and continue in this field. So women are still needed. So I hope to see more women joining engineering field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jieying. And maybe I have one more short question for Borhene before I will ask Shanti, who is listening very carefully what the colleagues are saying, or asking her one more question. Borhene, you talked about the Global Coalition and the ADB. I think you mentioned, and many of the other organizing partners are members of that. What role can the Global Coalition play in testing and piloting or even supporting full-scale implementations of technology-powered delivery of skills development that is actually inclusive and brings equity and opportunity for the vulnerable as well? And we just talked a little bit about gender. Maybe can I hear some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jost, for giving me again the floor, and I will be very brief. Maybe 3 ideas to advance our discussion. First of all, when we are speaking about equity and inclusion, for us, all means all. That means everybody, not only some specific group. Of course, gender dimension is important, but we need to speak about disabled person. We need to speak about ethnic minorities. We need to speak about refugees and migrants. So the question of equity has to be an inclusive one and not leaving no one behind. This is a very important aspect. Second, through the coalition, we have seen that the task of reaching the hardest to reach is daunting, and it requires multi-stakeholders, and it requires a combination of action. It's not only about connecting, it's also about nutrition, it's about health, it's about content, it's about teacher preparation. So that multi-stakeholder has to be important. And the third dimension that we have to take into consideration, it has to be evidence-based. We speak a lot about initiatives, and probably we will hear, and during this KISS forum, we have heard about many initiatives, including in the work we are doing through the coalition, through the Broadband Commission, through the G20, but we have less evidence about impact, that those programs have helped reach to the most marginalized and helped fill the learning losses. And we have to take into consideration that the learning losses are huge. because of the COVID, 100 million additional learners will not reach the basic proficiency in literacy and numeracy. Those are just one part of the crisis that we are living. So the equity and inclusion has to take into consideration more evidence. And this is the work we are doing with ADB, for example, looking at surveys on the skills dimension. We are doing work with UNICEF and the World Bank on the learning losses, and we are publishing work end of September. We are having a mission recovery together with UNICEF and the World Bank to ensure that every learner go back to school and get the learning, the remedial learning. So we have to take into consideration the data dimension and the evidence for that. Otherwise, we are speaking in a broad thing, and we're not considering the key element for our action going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Borhene. And Shanti, you have listened very carefully to our colleagues on the panel, and you are working, as I understand, primarily on the Central West regions these days. So, in your opinion, can you share what could be the biggest gains and what could be the difficult barriers to adopt a leapfrog approach in skills development?
Thank you, Jost. I think the gains are like they can be pretty obvious and big gains by investing in the sort of 4IR skills that we've been talking about. They will enable people to access better quality jobs, better paid jobs, just the kind that Mr. Bhakti was talking about earlier on. It will help people to move into occupations that are in sunrise industries or growing industries, because the future labor markets are going to have a significant proportion of new technologies and digitalization, and the COVID-19 process has only accelerated those changes. So investing in the kind of advanced skills needed will definitely bring significant long-term employment potential gains. And that means that will unlock great economic and social value for the individual and also for societies. For the individual, it provides long-term gains, but also for the society as such, and greater social mobility and greater productivity for companies, as I mentioned in my presentation. The barriers are also significant. Let's not underplay them. The first is, the resistance to change from conventional and traditional actors and institutions, which have to become more agile and more responsive. It also about malfunctioning labor market institutions. For instance, if we have, we've all heard many people talk about informal versus formal and so on. And as gig economy and other such work practices gain traction, how can labor market institutions provide the kind of social protection and social insurance, such as unemployment insurance, social other types of supporting mechanisms for people working in those types of settings? We can't leave them out there. So we need proper governance systems to care for them. Only then will they be able to tap the gains. And effective employment services are also very crucial to translate skills into job opportunities. And these come in the form of career coaching, career counseling, placement services, and skills upgrade while at work. All these will become as important as investing in just training and skills development courses. So these ancillary labor market services will become very, very important. And the last barrier I'd like to mention is what Borhene also mentioned: below basic competencies. We cannot build on a weak edifice. If we want to bring higher order competencies, we need the foundation to be strong. So lack of foundational caliber of competencies will be a great barrier as well. Back to you.
Thanks, Shanti. So I want to bring in the audience as soon as possible, but not without consulting two of our most senior technical experts at the ADB. So as you know, every day we ask two ADB experts to help us to digest a little bit what we hear in our panels. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome Fook Chong. He's a senior social sector specialist for skills development at the ADB. And also with us is Ms. Sin Long. She's a social sector specialist at the Central and West Asia Department. And I asked him maybe in 3 minutes to digest a little bit. I mean, we were touching a lot of topics. Chong, what are your key takeaways or observations from the conversation so far?
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. Yes, indeed, congratulations to the panelists. I think we have a really deep and rich discussion. And I think these are really important topics for TVET as well as, the Industry 4.0. We look at, TVET, as it is now, we actually have a lot of legacy challenges, For example, Mr. Borhene has talked about, equity, inclusiveness. We have talked about, lifelong learning for a long time and try to implement in many projects. But at the same time, there are also other legacy challenges, like, TVET curriculum, content, the collaboration between industry and institute, particularly, on structure-based program and learning, about teachers' quality, about the lack of a good training facilities, so on and so forth, right? And at the same time, we also hear that Industry 4.0 is here. Digitalization, is being accelerated because of COVID-19, and so how do we help the developing member countries, to make sense, of trying to address legacy challenges, and at the same time, trying to implement IR 4.0 in the institution to deliver, IR 4.0 training courses. Right. So, in fact, just to sort of borrow from Shanti's presentation, right? She talked about many of the developing member countries, the industry, bulk of it are still in Industry 2.0, Industry 2.5, or even 3.0, so similarly, in our TVET institution in the developing member country, many of them are also, maybe stuck in Industry 2.0 of TVET, Industry 2.5 of TVET. So what can be done, or what should be done, to help them? So this is important question, to be answered. And also we hear from this Ben from WEF, about the use of SIRI, the 16th dimension. And I think, the dimension on leadership, on this workforce development, is really important. And perhaps we could borrow something from SIRI, and also use it to assess our TVET institution in our projects in the developing member countries, especially to do an assessment not only of the industry, but also where TVET institution are, in order to sort of prepare them, to prepare a project that can support, the strengthening and the improvement of TVET delivery in TVET institution. Just now, Jieying, show a slide about this smart living lab for delivering training of Industry 4.0. I think what she showed is only just one slide, but I think the capability, to be able to set up such Industry 4.0 lab, has a lot of depth, technical depth. How can we actually, bring that kind of expertise, to support the TVET institution is also something that we have to see, to create a model, to support our projects. Just a very simple example, in the current situation, in the current practice, many of the TVET institutions, when they have a project with ADB, with World Bank, or other bilateral agency, typically you do a procurement, you buy a plug and play training equipment, training machine. But in IR 4.0, in digitalization, you just simply can't buy a plug and play, equipment, machinery. You really have to, get the lecturers to, dirty their hand to learn about, how to integrate the different components, the sensor, the IoT platform, the hardware, the software, in order to create a smart living lab. So, I stop here. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot more, collaboration that needs to be carried out, among a development agency. So we hope to see more of that, coming in the future. I stop here. Thanks a lot. Over to you,
Chong,
Josh.
for your rich observations. Excellent. And I hand over right away to Sid Long. She was also listening very carefully. Any key takeaways or observations you can highlight for us, maybe in 3 minutes?
Thank you very much, George, and also all our panelists. Congratulations for your wonderful presentations and discussions. I'd hope, also to, bring your consideration, to the teacher development in the TVET institutions, for facing the generation that is more technically native, who can utilize different sources, for learning or even self-learning. So which capacities the teachers in the TVET institutions demonstrate or develop, in terms of their own lifelong learning. This is also, put under the context that also shared, which were also shared, by Shanti and Mr. Chakroun, that, about this regional context or country context. So, for example, what about, the role of the government of a country who may foresee the infusion of technology in the country's economic sectors, as well as, as well as on the aspect of improving the country competitiveness. This will be, important, to encourage, encourage, the adoption of the progress of technology, in the industries that will help, drive, the, further progress in the training institutions to, upgrade their profiles. But, as also observed by our panelists, there are regions and countries where you see, industries are actively following up with the technological transformation, and teachers through the, dual training, system or, active collaboration with industry can be involved in various activities linking with the industry, and hence they are able to catch up with the latest industry requirements on the upgraded technologies and skills. However, in other countries and regions where you may still see, as also Chong pointed out, industries are more traditional or even not feeling pressing of such technological upgrades. So is there any role for our TVET training institutions to lead the cycle, to take the role as leading and pulling, factor, rather than being driven or being pushed? So there is who will be the first to act, right? And then what the TVET institutions, can really put inside the system to drive things up. Is it possible? Because we may say, would this be a supply side driven by the skills development services? In terms of this, I would like to, also bring your attention about or consideration about this international collaboration, across countries, especially between TVET institutions, for example, ITE in Singapore and other TVET institutions in other countries. Like you could build up such collaboration relationship and then, help, drive up something first. So these are, my takeaways from the presentation and discussions. And thank you very much for the chance to be recommended.
Thank you very much, Sin Long. Thank you very much, Chong, for that. And I have some leeway. I can allocate 5 minutes from my closing remarks to the Q&A. So we have 15 minutes. And I would invite all my speakers to be as brief as you can. I know that with all of you, I could have a single session for probably 1.5 hours alone. So, but we received a lot of questions. There is a colleague who helped me also to so to say, fish some out, and I would like to start actually maybe with Ben Ong, who has been the longest waiting now. Ben Ong, there was a question based on your experience with SIRI. What should developing countries do to prepare for the Industrial Revolution 4.0 education? Maybe 3 key points.
Yeah, so thanks so much for the question. I think first and foremost, I think the main recommendation that we give is for governments or companies in developing countries to really understand the current state of their maturity is first. It's not meaningful to prepare anything if you don't know your current state. So take the SIRI assessment or do any other some form of like self-diagnostic tool to understand where you stand, which are the areas you need to work on. Once you have a sense of that, then work with your multipliers or the general community of education institutions, business associations, or multi-leds like ADB to see if there's any opportunities to support you in building up any learning programs to work on some of the weaker areas that you've identified as part of the exercise. So I think in 1 minute, this would be something I would recommend to any community in developing countries to do.
Thank you, Ben, for this concise answer. And I jump straight to John Trew, and there was one of our participants actually who was interested in hearing our panelist views on the 3 lenses. So if you have followed our initial keynote by Mr. Bakchi about the 3 lenses, you know what I'm talking about, but I will hand that over to John. And I think John recalls, maybe can you just summarize the 3 lenses as you recall them before you answer?
Yeah, so the ones that were key here were the issue of nutrition, gender, and formality and decent work. And so UNICEF really appreciates is sort of that is the approach that we've been working on for 75 years. We have to meet young people and children where they are and not assume they're going to come to us. We now have the opportunity, as my colleague from UNESCO said, to really look at the evidence base, the analytics behind our programs, and to be laser focused on targeting these issues. Nutrition starts so early. We have to really look at that at the early and look at the journey that young people are taking throughout their childhood into adulthood and into an employment. We also need to understand what are those gender dimensions that young people are facing just to get to the same starting line as their male counterparts. And that's something that we need to be very cognizant of. And young people themselves, 9 out of 10 will tell you, the choice between an informal and formal work, they're going to pick formal work. So how do we look at the formality of informal work or providing social protection mechanisms to young people who are faced with the informality of work?
Thank you, John. And I go to Jieying. Jieying, there was one of our participants who asked, how should a smart classroom in a public school be designed in order to align with Industry 4.0, and do teachers at ITE get actually trained for Industry 4.0?
Okay, to answer to the question, I think I will share our journey. So during our conceptualization journey for this Smart Manufacturing Living Lab, we undergo challenges and numerous refined discussion and consultation with our industrial partners. And during the implementation, we break down into 3 stages. So first is we work on the machines, after that to station, and also integration to the whole production line. So this is our journey for designing the Smart Manufacturing Living Lab. So after numerous rounds of discussion, consultation, integration, we have our Smart Manufacturing Living Lab. So next question, do teachers at IT get trained. So we do have a team who attend courses to equip us with the I4 training. So after the training, we did come back to the school to share what we learned and also the experience with our fellow colleagues in School of Engineering. So we have sharing session. We also have the TTT program, Train the Trainer program. So we will train our fellow colleagues with the skills which we have and we learn during the journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jieying. And I see that the most popular question goes to Shanti with 40 votes. Shanti, how can Industrial Revolution 4.0 be applied to education? Will education transform and use these technologies for better teaching and learning? This is actually a question, and I can identify the source. Dr. Stephen McKee is asking you that.
Yes, absolutely. I think technologies, or especially of the digital disruptive kinds that we've been talking about, can really turn the delivery of education and training on their head. So the conventional ways that we've known can really be transformed completely through the use of such tools, and we're hearing examples of such things. So if you think about TVET, the use of simulation-based teaching and learning, using augmented reality, virtual reality, which can approximate real-life situations, but also provide the opportunity for learners to get a grasp of the do's and don'ts before they go on to operate in a real-life situation. I also mentioned things like intelligent training systems, which really mean that, for instance, let us take an example of maybe an online quiz that someone can take, which will then assess some patterns in the way they learn and where they could be making mistakes, and then kind of cue them on to dig deeper into some of the topics that they may not have grasped. So that's the kind of artificial intelligence based or machine learning based training systems that can really help self-learners. Especially at TVET and higher education, we are looking at autonomous learners who can use these kinds of tools to strengthen their competencies. We can look at online learning platforms where we can bring the best of resources or best of trainers to a low resource in settings through online synchronous learning together with participants at the other end. We can look at, I would really like to be very optimistic about digital tools for the creative professions. I mean, the kind of opportunities that are out there now for creative professions to really expand very significantly, whether it's in the form of films, art, music, and what digital tools can help students for these professions to become capable in these professions as design professionals, as in the creative professions is enormous. So at the school level, of course, we talk about things like I mentioned QR coded textbooks. Similarly, we can think about intelligent learning materials, which are then allowing learners to access digital resources, which are interactive in the way they provide the learning opportunities. So the opportunities are really enormous, and I think over time we're also looking at such technologies which were quite prohibitive in terms of cost becoming more affordable. So their uptake and their deployment are also expected to grow in time. And we heard the example of the smart manufacturing living lab. That's a precise example of how training delivery is being changed. So when we thought about the old model of teaching factories, where a training institution will be paired with a factory where students can go and learn hands-on, a smart manufacturing living lab is actually doing precisely that for the new technologies. So these are really exciting times and great opportunities to deploy technologies to improve the delivery, which becomes far more interactive and far more problem solving. Like, it helps to diagnose where learners may be off track and needing to work more on. Back to you.
Thank you, Shanti. And the last question from the audience goes, of course, to Borhene. How can local initiatives which have been evidence and practice-based in inclusive education be recognized when they do not receive support from local agency? Without recognition, these strategies cannot be upscaled and in the process deprive other children to benefit from it. So how can they be supported for upscaling is a question from our audience. Borhene, maybe a concise answer to that?
Indeed, thank you, Jost. And it's really a gift, this question, because I think this is a point that also Chin Long was referring to, is are we able to nurture a local ecosystem or not? That's a very critical dimension of the discussion. It's important to empower teachers, but also to reinforce the schools and institutions. But we have to build a local ecosystem that is thriving. And from my point of view, this requires policy interventions in terms of incentives for local stakeholders, in terms of capacitating local stakeholders, but also in terms of regulatory frameworks. Today, and Shanti is highlighting the assets and the opportunities, but there are also threats. We know that there are issues related, for example, to data privacy and security. We know that there are issues related to divides, to connectivity. So that local ecosystem that is multi-stakeholders, mobilizing private companies, civil societies, public authorities, is a very critical dimension. The second aspect is the policy learning dimension, meaning how a system is learning from the experiences and how it is able to upscale or to mainstream this. And in many cases, unfortunately, local stakeholders look at the neighbors or to the international experience and not build on sometimes very important, relevant local experience. Last piece, and there is something that we didn't discuss at all, and it's important for the local ecosystems. It's about the resources, where the money will come from. And we are speaking about TVET. We are finishing a work looking at the global financing. And for TVET, there is an important instrument that is called training funds. More than 70 countries all over the world, including in Asia, have training funds. Those training funds have to be mobilized for responding to the Industry 4.0 and the demand for skills, for reskilling, upskilling, both youth, but also workers who are in the labor market. And I feel that this is something that we have to keep attention to. Maybe it doesn't respond to the concrete question, but the training fund can also support local initiatives and innovation and upscaling them and mainstreaming them. And this is a very important dimension that we have to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Borhene. So as I mentioned before, I have 10 minutes for summing up, including announcing the innovation marketplace. I will donate 3 minutes from that. Hopefully you don't make me regret it, my dear colleagues, to ask you one last question where you have one sentence, okay? One sentence to answer it. Shanti started her presentation with saying the future is already here. So, so what is the one or maybe two major transformational change you would like to see as soon as possible to prepare the education sector in Asia and the Pacific, but especially the TVET sector, for a post-pandemic future? I mean, you can probably say 10 points, each of you, but I want to hear maybe the one or two that are to your heart. I don't know who I pick on first, but maybe John, without any warning, what is your one or two major transformational change you would like to see as soon as possible?
I think we have to remember transformational change doesn't have to be massive, doesn't have to be huge. And the one for me, I think, you often hear that TVET is second-class education. It's the default if I can't go to college, if I can't do something else. And really, TVET needs a makeover. We need, and honestly, we often hear that parents would prefer having an unemployed child who was a lawyer than an employed child who was a plumber. And that really demonstrates what we're talking about here, is that TVET really needs a makeover. We need to call it something else, employment education or something, where it doesn't have the stigma of being second class or default.
Thank you, John. Ben Ong, Any one transformation change you'd like to see? Unmute yourself, please, first.
Transformation change, I think, if there's only one area, I think would be a greater emphasis on self-evaluation. I think too many people kickstart on too many things without even doing a stock take of where they are. And I think it ends up many people walking in the wrong direction for a little bit too long. So if there's one thing to echo, I would say to encourage more organizations to come up with some form of self-assessment program first to evaluate the current state, and then to emphasize on greater integration between education and some other elements that are intrinsically linked, but I think as many of the panelists mentioned, are not sufficiently integrated together.
Thank you. These are all good points, although a little bit longer than expected. Jieying, to the point, 1 or 2 sentences.
Okay, my 2 sentences for our education sector is I hope that we can continue the momentum of positive changes that we have gathered and continue to make use of technology to make learning more enjoyable for our students.
Thank you. Borhene, your last, very short, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. For me, there are 2 major transformations. One, it has to be pedagogical transformation, and that's learner centers. That's a pedagogy that is actively engaging, leveraging the technology, and not in a way driven by the technology. The second aspect that I feel important, and we didn't discuss it today, is that we don't want to prepare robots. We want to prepare human being. And that means we have to have a well-rounded set of skills. It's not only about job specific, it's not only about employability skills, but also about skills for engaging in societies actively, citizenship, tolerance for others, and intercultural skills. So those are dimensions that we would like to see humankind acquiring, and not only a very specific and narrow set of skills. Over.
Thank you very much, Borhene. And Shanti, your last thought.
Thanks, Jost. I have a few, but let me just make one point here. This is about climate resilient infrastructure. So ADB has estimated that between 2016 and 2030, there's a need for investing 26 trillion in climate resilient infrastructure. And I would like to see specialized, advanced skill institutions come up to serve high quality jobs in climate resilient infrastructure. I mean, given that digitalization in construction, whether it's smart transportation, smart logistics, smart cities is growing so exponentially. That is my wish to see a transformation.
Thank you, Shanti. Thank you all panelists. Thank you, Long and Chong, for commenting. Thank you for audience for staying with us. And I have right away a feedback survey for you. So did you find the session